Okay, I think we're down near the end here somewhere.
Yeah, starting 13. Yeah, I didn't mark it.
Just a couple of links here. We were talking about some of the players in this on the we got the two sides here. We got the French the revolutionists, the French Republic, and we have the Holy Roman Empire on the other side. France on one side, the Holy Roman Empire on the other side, and Austria, basically, what we're talking about. And we have this individual, this personality called Prince Constance. And just to give you that was the individual we're talking about there, Wenzel Anton. And he was born in Vienna, one of 19 children. He was a diplomat and statesman of the Holy Roman Empire, and was made a prince of the Holy Roman Empire. And in 1764, he was made a prince. 1776, a prince of the Kingdom of Bohemia. And he was appointed conqueror of the empire. Constance's most important and extremely influential office was that of the character of state and minister of foreign affairs, which he held 1753 to 93, and where he had Empress Maria Theresa's full trust. And thanks in large part to him, Habsburg Austria entered the Treaty of Versailles in 1756, and with their old enemy France in 1757 expanded to include Russia and Sweden against the Kingdom of Prussia to win back Silesia. And that basically was his who that was, and he was a player in that Treaty of Commitz. And I guess the only other one we have here, an individual, is Wenzel. He was a diplomat and politician of the Habsburg monarchy, born in Brussels, was a cousin of diplomat Philip Graf von Wenzel. And in 1779 he became minister at St. Petersburg, and he was also a player in that. He died age 55 in Vienna. And they talk about a few of these places here. Brother Thomas talks about a few of the places. Part of what they wanted to do, what they were demanding, was the restoration of the property of the clergy of the lands of Alsace, with all their rights to the German princes. This is part of what the Holy Roman Empire was demanding of France. And this was the area that they're talking about there, just on the border between France and Germany. And they wanted that restored. And Avignon, which is a city down in the south of France. And then it talks about the territory, the Niacan territory to the Pope, which is actually the territory in which Avignon is. Avignon is right in here, and so it would be the territory surrounding that. Is what they and this is an ancient map of it here on the left. So that gives you just a bit of an idea of what kind of territories we're talking about when we're reading this. So anyway, I guess where we ended up was that in the spring of 1792, the first vial began its outpouring by means of a declaration of war by France against Austria, Austria was the principal nation in that collection of nations known as the Holy Roman Empire, and therefore the declaration was against all the nations of Europe. And I think it kind of took them took those nations by surprise. I think they really felt they had France in a corner. And they really did not intend to go to war with France. At least the Leopold II, who was the head of the Holy Roman Empire, definitely didn't really have that in mind. But when France declared war against them, they had no choice. So, bringing on his first vial was a result of masterful moves on the divine chessboard. And Brother Thomas says here, by this historical sketch, the reader, enlightened in the knowledge of the deity with spiritual understanding, will be enabled to perceive the working of the seven spirits on all the agents of the situation, on the powers, the immigrants, the refractory priests, the French king, political parties in the assembly, the clubs, and the populace, to bring on a crisis in which there would be found scope for the outpouring of wrath upon the worshippers of the beast's image and upon the men who had the beast's sign. The sketch illustrates not only the great voice or note of preparation for war, but what the seven angel spirits did in obedience to the command to go forth. They issued from the nave July 27, 1790, and reached the crisis predetermined in April 20th, 1792, a period of 21 months. This was a short period, but pregnant with events which, after 75 years, are still in the process of development. Of course, that is speaking from Brother Thomas's viewpoint in the time of his writing, which is a footnote in one of the editions has here. The reference to 75 years is derived from the time periods of Daniel 12. From 1260 to 1335 is 75. It is significant that the epoch of 75 years from 1792 reaches to 1867, when the papacy was in sharp decline. The termination of its temporal power took place about 1870. I think that I'm thinking of one too many terminations there. The termination of its temporal power took place about 1870, which was, I don't know just what was the time of the writing of this volume, but I think it would all be in about the same time period.
Late 1860s, or you're talking about the publishers? Or
well, no, I'm talking about Brother Thomas. The determination of the temporal power and the writing of Eureka, I think, was pretty close.
Late 1860s, right?
Yeah. So he talks about a few dates there. July 27th. Takes us back to that paragraph 2. That was the Declaration of Pillnitz on July 27, 1790. And the Declaration of Pillnitz, as we know, was a statement issued on the 20... Actually, the date that he gives there is a little different than what historians give. They give the date of the Declaration of Pillnitz at 27th August. 1791 at Pillnitz Castle near Dresden by the Habsburg Holy Roman Emperor. These are the players in this. The Holy Roman Emperor Leopold II and Frederick William II of Prussia, and a couple of other personalities that we've already looked at. They declared the joint support of the Holy Roman Empire and of Prussia for King Louis XVI of France against the French Revolution. Calling on European powers to intervene if Louis was threatened, the declaration was intended to serve as a warning to the French revolutionaries not to infringe further on the king's prerogatives and to permit his resumption of power. The statement contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolutionary Wars. The declaration stated that Austria would go to war if and only if all the other major European powers also went to war with France. Leopold chose this wording so that he would not be forced to go to war. He knew William Pitt, Prime Minister of Great Britain, did not support war with France. Leopold merely issued the declaration to satisfy the French immigrants who had taken refuge in his country and were calling for foreign interference in their homeland. The National Assembly of France interpreted the declaration to mean that Leopold was going to declare war. Radical Frenchmen who called for war, such as Jacques Pierre Rousseau, used it as a pretext to gain influence and declared war on 20th April 1792, leading to the campaigns of 1792 and the French Revolutionary Wars. So that was the backfire on Leopold II here. This is the individual here, Leopold II. He was born Peter Leopold Joseph Anton Joachim Pius Gotthard, was Holy Roman Emperor and King of Hungary and Bohemia from 1790 to 1792. I don't want to go all through that, but that was the individual that reading about there. And Frederick the William II of Prussia was the other one here. Prussia was a huge territory, took in a lot of France and pretty much a good part of Czechoslovakia and a part of what is now Russia. And it was probably one of the largest territories, other than, well, Austria wouldn't even be that large. And the other one here was William Pitt. He was the British politician in 1759 to 1806. That's the individual there. So, in summary of the what we had read there in paragraph 13, many events and political activities and declarations and edicts and vetoes all work together in a 21-month process. And if we look at it as being August the 27th, 1791, it was even less. It was just a very short process to bring about the inevitable and predetermined result that was the plan and purpose of the divine chess master. He has all these players here, all the prophets, the immigrants, refractory priests, the French king, political parties in the assembly, the clubs, the Jacobin club, and all the populace. These are all the players, and just like he says, it's like a giant chessboard. Gordon?
Those refractory priests, they were the ones that supported the king, weren't they?
Yes. Yeah, they were the old school kind of thing. Yeah. This kind of takes us to the France. On April 20th, France declares war on the King of Hungary. This is 1792, and Bohemia. And Prussia joins with Austria.
What?
Yes.
There are similar backgrounds, but it's just a religious type work? Was it like a religious type thing, or was it just a power?
Religion entered into it in terms of the
what side you were on.
What side you were on, I guess, but it was very political.
But why? I mean, just for a land grab, or
for freedom of speech and thought, to get out from under the power and control of the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic system, and the despotism and the feudal system of lands, of being able to, the people were so held down. There's only the two classes, the very, very poor and very, very rich. And the feudal system supported that. And so it was an act of desperation, I guess, on the part of the people, and as we'll see as we get into the next section, it was just events that work together to shape an atmosphere of total lack of trust. Just a total lack. Nobody trusted anybody in France. Gordon?
I guess there were different ideas on religion, but most of them were Catholic, and it'd be like a little bit like the uprisings in the Arab countries today, where they're pretty near all Islamists. They're Muslim, but there's different sects and different thinking amongst them, and some just want their freedom to express themselves.
Both sides were Catholic. I mean, the very poor and the very rich were both Catholic. So it wasn't. It really wasn't too much. It was just a struggle for freedom. They were resisting the domination aspect of the Catholic religion. I don't think they were resisting their religion, but the domination aspect of it.
With the ones that had the people that had the Jews who were trying to live it, did they have a kind of a freedom here now when these groups were going at each other? Would they be able to?
Yeah, I think that's a fairly accurate statement. Yeah, these sides are more or less going after each other, and I think that those who kind of stayed out of the fray, which if there were any true believers there, would tend to do.
They have a few years of peace.
Yeah.
Yes, I read that was probably what brought about freedom of the truth.
Right. Gordon?
That's very likely in the purpose of God and the overall purpose of God why this earthquake, as it's spoken of, took place, was because the system that existed was so crushing that there was no freedom of thought, really. And this was a total emancipation of thought. If you, I haven't read much about it, but if you look at the writings of Karl Marx and that, they're turning everything on its head, really, because they just had so much of the other. They were just like up to here. Enough is enough. And they, of course, as human nature is, goes right to the opposite end of thinking.
I think when Luther was time period for Luther.
It would be a little after that. I think Luther was before, I believe.
But that also was different thinking.
There was definitely Protestantism was a factor by this time. Yeah, King James Bible had been printed, I believe, in the 1700s. I think was the first printing, was it not? 1611. Yeah, so definitely in the 17th century you saw the printing of the King James Version, which was a major breakaway from the mainstream church. And there's a lot of the press had been invented by that time, and you go back, I mean, there's a lot of activity taking place already in the Protestant movement. It'd be very well entrenched, I would think. But more in Germany than in France. A lot of those, Germany and England, I think, was more so than France, where the Protestant movement was.
Didn't the Mennonites rise? He was a priest.
Yeah, I think if you go into those East European countries, and it was the seat of Protestantism.
But it must be remembered that really wasn't a changing of their theological ideas.
That's what I was saying. Both sides here were heavily entrenched in the Catholicism.
Yeah, Christendom.
And when they did finally, when things went so much awry, they eventually just gave up any religious belief. You remember, they almost went and turned atheist.
Yeah. Worship of reason.
Yeah, worship of reason.
They were priests that left the Catholic Church and started these other beliefs.
Right, but in here, these priests that left the mainstream church were still priests of the Catholic. They just embraced the revolution by force, really. They were forced to or face death or... Yeah. There's a couple of things here that we had read earlier that I think I just looked them up a little bit. The diet of Ratisbon. Has anybody got an idea what that might be? We read these terms and...
That was Napoleon.
Oh. Pardon?
I don't know the particulars about it, but a diet was like a legislature.
That's right. Yeah.
Legislative.
Yeah, probably is our deity. We're deity.
Yeah. It's a formal deliberative assembly. The term is mainly used historically for the imperial diet, the general assembly of the imperial estates of the Holy Roman Empire, and for the legislative bodies in certain countries. Modern usage mainly relates to the Japanese parliament, called diet in English. And the perpetual diet of Regensburg, which is Ratisbon, is the other term for it. When you look it up on the Wikipedia, for example, it refers you to the diet of Regensburg, which was what it was supposed to, the other name for it, I guess. It was the permanent imperial diet of the Holy Roman Empire from 1663 to 1806, seated in Regensburg or Ratisbon in present-day Germany. And in early years, it was a tool for consolidation of Habsburg power in the empire. However, by the middle of the 18th century, it was largely dysfunctional and a mere congress of diplomats that produced no important legislation in political and constitutional matters. The weak institutions be called a bladeless knife without a handle, and during the Diet's existence, the empire increasingly became nothing more than a collection of largely independent states. The last action of the Diet on 25th March 1803, which is a few years in advance of what we're talking about here, was the passage of the German mediatization, which reorganized and secularized the empire. Following the approval of that final constitutional document, the Diet never met again, and its existence ended with the fall of the empire in 1806. So that's... Yeah. So when we read here that you want to ratify the conclusions of the Diet of Ratisbon, it's kind of that tool that they had to make, decisions, and they wanted some of these conclusions ratified. This was Austria, or the Holy Roman Empire, so they wanted this to be an effective tool for them. And there was this Rochambeau is under the commander Rochambeau. He was quite a character. He was in the French Revolution and the American Revolution, and actually became one of the American founding fathers. So that's what
He probably one of
another one. Yeah.
Probably one of the guys that organized for the Statue of Liberty to come
Right.
across.
Yeah. He was, let's see, American Revolution. He landed at Newport, Rhode Island on the 10th of July. It was held there inactive for a year, and so on. He was a commander of a force, and his force left Rhode Island, marching across Connecticut to join Washington on the Hudson River in New York. From July 6 to August 18, 1781, the Odell Farm served as Rochambeau's headquarters. And upon his return to France, he was honored by King Louis XVI and was made governor of Picardy, a historical province in north of France. Actually, I'm in error here. He was not considered one of the. He was played a very large part in the American Revolution, but it was Lafayette that was one of the founding fathers, considered one of the founding fathers of the.
He combined with the Marquis of Lafayette troops.
Yeah, he was worked in with Lafayette, and Yeah, Lafayette was the other one I was actually thinking of here for that. You can almost get a feel for the kind of character you're looking at just by looking at the picture, you know. And it says more than it says 1,000 words.
I was just thinking how funny it is that, you know, back in those days, young men dyed their hair white to give the impression of wisdom. And these days, old men dye their hair dark to give the impression of youth.
That's right.
Tells us how far our society has progressed. Eh?
Like he would have been born in September 1757, so you know he'd be under 40 years old.
Yeah.
You know.
Was that there a year or a week? Or weeks.
Could be. But either way, whether you dyed it or wore a wig, it was the idea was to
desire.
Yeah.
That was the desire.
So you respect him.
Yeah.
There's a place named after him, isn't there?
Right.
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Oh.
It also talked about Bohemia. That Bohemia is right in this area here, part of Czechoslovakia today. The border of France is over here, and so when it talks about those, he marshaled a lot of troops against the French border from Bohemia. He would have just brought them across.
What is Bohemia today?
Part of it is Czechoslovakia. The other part would be Germany. Yeah. But,
I was just trying to think that, like, it's just curious that the areas today that are really embracing the Brussels headship are the same areas,
players,
and it doesn't seem to be able to spread outside of that. Like Norway and Sweden and that, they stay out of that.
Right.
And we expect Britain to as well, but it just seems like that those types of people just really cling to that doctrine or thought process or whatever goes on.
But doesn't Brother Thomas say that they're more the clay and not the iron?
Yeah, well, the people are, the democracy aspect is more the clay.
The Low Countries he talks about there are the areas of the Netherlands and this and also these rivers and stuff.
Viking countries.
Northern France and the Netherlands.
Does Poland fall within that? Poland? Within confines?
More in the area of Prussia, I think. Prussia would embrace much of the map of Prussia.
South and east.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it on this section.
Chestnut is a good discussion.
Yeah, I noted that one. Yeah, he really makes a very good point there. When you think about it, you know.
One thing that caught my eye was that misunderstanding of that declaration there. That thinking that was a declaration of war. Normally speaking, countries that are not eager to go to war would be careful to seek out any way that could be interpreted otherwise. So that's the hand of God in there.
Yeah, it was just so foreign, I think, to their thinking that France would be in any kind of a position at all to declare war. They looked at them as being totally incapable of carrying on a campaign.
But I think even the revolutionaries in France would be reluctant to engage in war because they were outnumbered.
Sure.
So the fact that they misinterpreted that had to be divine hand, because they'd be looking for any way that they could avoid war out of that document.
Right.
Napoleon was Austrian, wasn't he?
Was that?
Napoleon, the first Napoleon was Austrian.
I don't think so. He was French.
I don't know.
Mind you, there's a lot of overlap between between some of those.
It seems to me during the war they spoke about Hitler thinking and Napoleon.
Yeah.
He was Austrian. Hitler was Austrian.
Is that?
Hitler was Austrian.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I kind of think Napoleon was not by birth, but by ancestry.
Well, we'll be saying Napoleon, I guess, as we go forward here a little ways. We're actually before his time just yet. I mean, yes, he was alive during this time, but he really hadn't come into any kind of wasn't really a player in these particular events yet. So we get to section 16.02, and there's 20 paragraphs on that. I've got headings here for the first 10. There's still got to do the last 10, but we'll just take a look at the expositor on this first. So the first vial upon the earth. You know, what we've been doing here, we've been talking quite a bit about the first vial, but really we've just been looking at the events that led up to it. The first vial would have been the actual first part of the French Revolutionary Wars themselves. What we're looking at is just the, up to this point in the Great Voice was just the events that was shaping things up for that. So now we're going to be considering the actual outpouring of that first vial, or the actual war itself. A great voice says from the temple here commands the 7 angels to commence their work of judgment. The first pours out his vial upon those identified with the beast, and they suffer from great ulcers that appear on them. So in verse 1, I heard a great voice out of the temple, and the voice heard from the temple is the divine voice, and its instructions to the 7 angels are for the ultimate benefit of the saints, the temple of God on earth. Paul declares that all things are for the sake of the elect, 1 Corinthians 4:15. The great international events that take place are for the benefit of believers inasmuch as they are steps leading to the final consummation. Accordingly, Christ calls upon his followers to lift up their heads, for their redemption draweth nigh, when they observe the latter-day fulfillment of prophecy. This great voice is analogous to the demands of the revolutionaries that resulted in the French Revolution. It was followed by a great voice which issued jointly from nations that confederated against revolutionary France in 1790 and protested against the treatment that had been meted out to Louis XVI and the French nobility. That's what we've just been taken in that section of Great Voice. Foreign armies were massed on the borders of France, forcing the revolutionaries to take up the sword against their enemies. The war forced upon France brought to the fore Napoleon, the most successful French general. Despite revolution within and attacks without, his military genius resulted in outstanding victories throughout Europe and brought for him elevation to the highest position in France. The events of this chapter therefore follow on from Revelations 11 verse 13, where the French Revolution is described as a great earthquake. It provides details of the third woe briefly referred to in that 11th chapter, verses 15 and 18. Let's look at that. This is going back to the 11th chapter, and the 7th angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders which sat before God on their seats fell upon their faces and worshipped God, saying, we give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art in the west and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned, and the nations were angry. And thy wrath is come, the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them that destroy the earth, or which destroy the earth. So said it was this third woe is that which is alluded to in that chapter, and that's what we're really taking right now. It projects us into that time of the end when the nations are angry. And it started right there back in the French Revolutionary Wars. And saying to the 7 angels, "Go your ways and pour out the vials of the wrath of God upon the earth." The Apocalypse reveals that the decisive events of history are under the supervision and guidance of angelic ministration and are not a matter of chance or caprice. See Daniel 4:17. This matters by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. So that's like your divine chessboard working among the nations. Gordon?
The quotation here about destroying them that destroy the earth. Is that a literal thing, or is it referring to destroying the people?
The earth is, you mean, is it the physical globe of the earth, or the people in it?
It wouldn't be the physical globe, but it would be.
I think if you look up the word, it would be cosmos, which would be the order of things, or the political system.
Where is that quotation? Is that the Old Testament or New?
Let's just take a look at that.
If it's New Testament, it would be cosmos.
I think that was from Revelations, wasn't it? 11?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Destroy the earth.
Yeah. Corrupt the earth.
Yeah. The word is diakero, from intensive, to destroy by corrupting it. It is used as a corrupting influence of evil company, the effect of dishonorable dealing by bringing people to want, mental corruption, the outworking of human nature. He's just given all the passages where it's used in that way. The corrupting effect of false doctrine. It is rendered defiled and destroyed. The noun Pithara is rendered corruption, relating to physical dissolution. So that's to do with the destroying, and it doesn't really deal with the term earth, but I think you can see what he's talking about is the systems, the corrupting systems upon the earth. So.
So, just trying to put this all in context, like the Europe was almost the earth in a sense. That it was the peak of civilization. It was the best that man had available to him, and that complete overturning of the thinking was so revolutionary because it was new, and it was also very foundational for man's civilization. But what we've got today, we've got the same thing still going on in all over the earth, but I mean particularly in the Arab countries, and yet we consider them more as a marginal, like they're not foundational to the rest of society, although they do influence. They have a big influence because of wealth and so forth. So that's why it's looked on as being a little different, but really it's the same thing that started there, just continuing on to today.
That's why that prophecy, the frog spirit, is so expressive of all of that. It's an influence that started there. The frog is a symbol of France, but really it wasn't France. It's what happened in France, really, more than the change in thinking, and that is working its way. It's like it's this ulcer he's talking about. It's a cancerous ulcer, and it's working its way. It's growing. It's a inflammatory mass. It's just growing on the body of the earth or the.
Sort of out of control.
Yeah.
There's an example that's taking place right now. It's in reverse because in Egypt, because they're trying to go back to a dictatorship almost, but the people are just, they will not have it.
That's right. It's coming. Where it's coming from is different, but the forces are the same. Yeah. It's oppressiveness resisted by the those who want their freedom to think and do. So anyway, I'll just go down here to read the headings off, because you can kind of see how it tells the story. Paragraph 1 is the first angel began an operation that included all of the other 6. He makes a note there that really the only angel is really talked about is the first one that went forth. And paragraph 2, the criteria that marks the area is affected by the outpouring of the vials. The criteria that marks the area affected by the outpouring of the vials. So what the criteria was that marked the area is what he's going to talk about in that paragraph. Paragraph 3, France was once considered besieged but reorganized and emerged victorious. 4, the symbol of the grievous and malignant ulcer, which is here like there fell noisome and grievous sore upon the men that had the mark of the beast. As he talks about that symbol. And paragraph 5, the ulcer is indicative of intense political irritation and inflammation. Paragraph 6, the intense revolutionary reactive carnage of the 2-year ulcer period. Paragraph 7, the radical changes effected by the Constituent National Assembly. Paragraph 8, the changing face of government results in radical changes of the power of the people. And it was interesting, he brings out how the governments changed so quickly, and what was loyalty to one system became treason to the next one, and so it resulted in the guillotiners being guillotined. Just when the change of government happened, all of a sudden you had been a loyal to France, and all of a sudden you're treason to France. And so that was that changing face of government, and it resulted in a reign of distrust within, and it caused the king to seek help from outside the borders. And that was the reason he went outside, to seek help from the Holy Roman Empire. And this was the catalyst in what happened afterwards. Paragraph 10 speaks about the surge of influence and power of the Jacobins. I guess that's about all the time we have today.
I looked up Napoleon Bonaparte. He was born of Italian royal lineage.
Really?
But he was born in France.
Yes, I understand that.